Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on a Fork, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined for this episode by none other than Sean Carnegie, who played Lee Johnson. Sean, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
Well, thank you very much, Neil, for that glowing, introduction. Given that, I think we'll talk about this later. Given that I only did 10 episodes but I feel that was more than I deserved. But thank you anyway.
No, not at all, not at all. Anyone that's been in Grange Hill is worthy of such an introduction. So, no, you don't need to thank me that much for that one. Like, what we'll do, Sean, is we'll start this episode the way we start every episode. And if you could tell us how you first got into acting.
Yeah, well, I was probably about eight or 9 years old at primary school, a nice little primary school up in North London called Fitzjohn's Primary School. And it was such a creative school. And I played music and I was in various assemblies and what have you. And one year, maybe I was 9, 10, coming towards the last couple of years, we did a medley of Shakespeare plays.
Ah, right, okay.
And I played a couple of different characters within this medley, and I really enjoyed doing it. And I got really good feedback from the teachers and some of the parents. And my mum's friend, who is Mark Dakota's mum.
All right, okay. Yeah.
They grew up together in Trinidad.
Wow.
And they moved over, they maintained their friendship. So Mark's mum, Mark and I kind of grew up as cousins, even though we weren't biological cousins, but we were a very close family. Anyway, so it's Mark's mum, Mark Dakota, who played Stuart alongside me. It was his mum that said to my mum, you should get Sean into acting because Mark goes to this drama school called Sylvia Young on a Saturday. He really enjoys it. You should take Sean along. And that's how it started. So I went to Sylvia Young, went to Sylvia's, and I did drama to begin with. And then my parents were keen for me to have more experiences. So they signed me up for tap dance and jazz.
Brilliant.
And, let's say there's a reason why no one has ever seen me on camera. But I wasn't too bad at tap, but jazz, I was awful. So, and I couldn't sing for toffee, so we kind of doubled down
on the acting. So you're at Sylvia Young's then. You've said you were with Mark, played Stuart. Was anyone else there who we might know?
Yeah, there were. So there were some people I'm about to meet. I only went on a Saturday.
Right.
So I think John Pickard.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in Grange Hill. And the Buckfield twins. Yeah. Julian Clare. Who else? I think Jamie Lahane. Did Jamie go to?
Possibly. I always get my schools mixed up, if I'm honest, because I've seen
Anna Barbara Speed.
Yeah. I think
Natalia Ponte.
Is Sylvia Young's? Is that the one where Denise Van Outen went to, and there's Askew and Kelly George?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Sylvia Young's. Yeah. So.
So those are the ones that spring to, and Mark Dakota, obviously. Joseph Toby.
Yeah.
He played the villain. He played the bully. Anyway,
he was horrible, wasn't he?
He was a nasty bit of work, that one. So that was the Sylvia crew.
Brilliant. Yeah. And did you get much work back then? Like,
oh yeah, I got a fair bit. I think those that went. So I never went full time.
Right.
And there was a point. I don't know. And we might get into this a bit later, but there was a point where I had to make a choice whether or not I really go into the acting or I keep my options open and I stay in more conventional school. And yeah, I made the decision to stay in more conventional school. So I only went on a Saturday, and I went up until I was 8. Started about 9 years old, and I stayed at Sylvia's until I was 18.
Yeah.
Going to the Saturday classes. So for someone that went only on Saturdays, I think I did all right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
aside from so how I got into Grange Hill really quickly was I was an extra in Grange Hill
Ah, right.
a
Okay.
couple of years before I got offered the part of Lee.
Right.
I was an extra, and then I went away, and then I got a part in. Do you remember an old TV series called Alfonso Bonzo?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was a spin-off called Billy Webb's Amazing Adventure.
Yeah.
So I got a part in that. It was only, I think it was like a 6 episode
Right.
run, and I did a few of those episodes. I played Winston, and I think it was either the director or casting director, one of the producers on Billy Webb, got me in to read for this part of Lee for Grange Hill.
But the thing about Billy Webb, right? So Alfonso Bonzo was a banana story, like really, like I've said this before on here. If you ever watch the very end of the first series of Alfonso Bonzo, it's proper scary. Like it's quite frightening, to be honest. But the thing about Billy Webb is Fleur Taylor was in Billy Webb, and Fleur Taylor played Imelda in Grange Hill. If you remember Imelda, the girl bully, she played Billy Webb's sister, and it was such a different character as well.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so and then I did a few TV commercials, and I was in the Bill, a couple of episodes in the Bill, a couple of episodes of EastEnders. I did a run at the Tricycle Theatre in Kilburn. It's a small theatre in Kilburn with Lenny James and Helen McCurry.
Right.
For the rest of their soul, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did all right. Yeah, it wasn't nothing to write home about, but for someone who was going to school still, and yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
And you did A Touch of Frost.
And A Touch of Frost, of course, with Sir David Jason.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, were you aware at the time, like how famous he was?
No, I don't think I was.
Right.
It was only when I told people who I was acting with. At the time in the scene, because I only had, I think, maybe 1 or 2 scenes with him, and he was lovely. He was really, really supportive and encouraging, and a really nice fellow. I remember that clearly. But no, I don't think I did. I don't think you do. As a kid, because how old was I? I would have been, I don't know, 14, 15.
Right.
And I hadn't really got into Only Fools and Horses at that age. So, I don't think I was. I think had I been, I think I would have been more nervous, I reckon.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? If you've not seen them in anything, then you wouldn't know, like you say, unless someone told you. But when I was looking, Lee Whitlock was also in those episodes you were in. And Lee Whitlock turned up in Grange Hill for a little bit when he was older. But he was in a lot. He was one of those people who you'd see the face on telly. Yes. You wouldn't necessarily know the name, but he turned up in all kinds. Like, okay, so what we'll do, we'll talk about Grange Hill now. And as you've said, you'd been an extra and you'd done the other things and got put forward to it.
Really quickly, Neil, to jump in, apology.
Yeah? No worries.
I might be the only person. Well, this is for you to do your research here. To have played 2 different characters. Oh, did you know? Did you look into it?
I knew you were going to bring this up.
Well, we do, us actors, we love it.
There has been a few, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
Right, okay. Okay.
So you went into Grange Hill in series 15, which went on air in 1992, and it was one of those weird things because you went in as Lee Johnson and you were in 3rd year. So before we get into that more, were you a fan of Grange Hill at the time? Like,
I was, but not a massive fan. So you know the whole Zammo years with the drugs and the asbestos, and I remember those. I don't know how old I would have been, but I remember that era pretty well. But and the start of the Justine Dean years a little bit, but the couple of years leading up to when I joined, No, but yeah,
Right.
so I think historically the characters start in year one and work their way
Yeah.
up to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
no. So yeah, we were helicoptered in for.
Yeah, that's it. Like it was one of those. There was no sort of big introduction to
Yeah,
Lee being. It was like Lee had always been there. We just never seen him before, and he was there because obviously Jacko was there, played by Jamie Lahane, and Lee was Jacko's mate, along with Stewart. Now, obviously at the time,
yeah.
Otis had left, who'd played Locho before you, and also Brian. Brian's character was still in Grange Hill, but was in hospital with leukemia.
Yeah.
So obviously that they needed people for Jacko to be doing his schemes with like
Yeah.
so because
So Jacko started in year seven.
yeah
He was in it for 2 years before I
yeah
joined. Right, okay, I forgot that. Yeah.
yeah he'd been there for 2 years, and it was a they always had someone who was like a money maker, didn't they? They always had someone who wanted to be trying to like get money from somewhere, and it was Jacko in that one. And whichever cronies Jacko had with him, Jacko got along for the schemes. And speaking of that, the first scene that we see Liam, they're trying to see who can clean the windows the fastest. And
Yeah.
at first, you're like, what
Yeah.
are they doing this for? Like, they're timing each other and they're properly scrutinizing each other, like how well they'd done it and all that.
Yeah.
And then we found out that they were doing it because they were going to go out washing car windscreens.
To earn a bit of paper, as you
Yeah.
say.
And so obviously they were practicing to see how fast he could be and
Yeah.
how thorough he could be as well.
They wanted to know how many cars they could clean in a short amount of time. There was method to their madness, Neil. There was
Brilliant.
method.
I just love the fact that there was always someone trying to make money, because when you're at school, you might not have realized, but there was always someone who had some way of
Extracting money out of
yeah.
their pupils, their fellow students.
There was two lads in our year who went into business selling pirate videos.
well, really quickly, I was when I went in my secondary school. I was somewhat entrepreneurial. I would go down to the shop, buy like bulk sweets, and then sell them in a place, light them up. And friends, not me, some friends of mine would do the same things with cigarettes.
Right? Okay. Yeah.
I'm buying 20 B&H and selling them for 20p a time.
Brilliant. Buying a Lucy, yeah. Okay. Now, as I say, they're looking at like how they can do the car windscreens. But the next bit is it's a science lesson, right? With Mr. Hankin, played by Lee Corns. But Lee Corns, an absolute legend, big friend of the podcast. He's been on here and he's influenced other people to come on the podcast as well. But David, I don't know if you remember the science lesson, and he's got like a tank of water, and they're doing the thing with the paperclip. And when I watched it back, it's like, hang on, this is actually teaching kids something. This isn't, it's obviously a plot point, but it's not just a plot point. They're actually showing, because he explains how the fact that it's the molecules in the water keeping it up, and then when he adds the detergent to it, out of and it was actually teaching the viewers something.
I'm almost certain, and I can't remember, but I'm almost certain, but I'm not sure. They must have had consultants, educational consultants on the show, because it was so informative in those lessons when the teachers were covering topics and what have you. It was factually accurate, and you learned stuff from it, and that was the main point. No one that was watching Grange Hill, because of its educational value, it was all of the outside of the classroom storylines that they were after. But no, you were learning something. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, after that lesson, Stuart really enjoyed the lesson, because he saw about how much he'd enjoyed it, and Lee was like, you get carried away too much in these lessons. But then Stuart pointed out to him that it was research for their window cleaning business, and they went out at lunchtime to go cleaning the windscreens. And the first customer whose windscreen that they cleaned told them that he'd cleaned the windscreen himself before he'd left the house that morning. So he didn't pay them and drove off.
He only told us, but if you remember correctly, because I've rewatched that, he only told us after we cleaned it.
Yeah, yeah.
He robbed us of our car. That's funny.
But Stuart never wanted to be put off. Said he was quite pleased with his technique. But Lee said he was doing this to get money for new trainers, not to feel good about what his technique was like. And they then said they should look for cars with dirty windscreens because people would definitely pay them. But the only problem was the cars were all clean. So Stuart came up with a plan. Can you tell us what the plan was?
Yeah, I can tell you the plan. The plan was to dirty up the windscreen artificially. So his plan was to get a bucket, fill it with mud and water and all kinds of nastiness. I think he stopped short of excrement. But
yeah, I would hope so, to be honest.
I wouldn't put it past you. Yeah, and so then we'll take a sponge with that mud bucket, that bucket full of mud, and then dab it on people's windscreen, wait for them to come out, because it was in a shopping centre.
Right.
Yeah. So there was loads of cars for us to target.
No. Now, I'm assuming when that was getting filmed, that the people whose cars were getting dirty knew that their cars were getting dirty.
Yeah, I think they were props.
Yeah, right, okay.
Otherwise, that's criminal damage.
Yeah, but it wasn't just people in the shops coming out and finding the car after you've all gone. So, as you say, they start dirtying it all up, and the first customer came along and they offered to clean it off for her for a price, but they struggled to clean it because they'd put too much on there. And she came out, obviously she's complained, and then she found the bucket of mud and poured it over their heads. Now, I'm assuming that was just one take.
What did I was thinking about it? I think it must have been one take. Right. I think it was one take. Was it? I think so. Because if you look, because like I said, I've watched it again recently because I knew I was coming on the show, and if you can see me chuckling.
Yeah, you can. Yeah,
you can see me chuckling, which I don't think they would. If they had an opportunity, they would. Yeah. Again. That's again. Anyway.
That's the thing. Like it's pretty obvious, to be honest, that you're all laughing when it happens, like because you know what's coming, and then it is funny what happens as well, because in real life you'd run away. There's no way the three of you would have got together in order to do it. Like
each other. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I mean, what it was real mud, I take it then.
No, I think it was some kind. It'd be interesting if you managed to get Mark on the show,
right? Yeah,
or any prop people on the show. I think it was some kind of cake,
right?
Some kind of chocolate cake mixture.
Wow,
that kind of thing. No, it wasn't mud. I don't think. It might have added a bit of grass to it.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
So we then found out that Lee's mum made him pay to get his blazer cleaned, but Stuart again, undeterred, said they shouldn't give up on the windscreen business. But Lee says, I don't think I can afford another of your money-making schemes. And again, another science lesson, Mr. Hankin, with bubbles. And it's weird because everyone's just sat there blowing bubbles around the classroom. And Jacko wondered if it would be any good for cleaning windows. But Alice asked why. The lads didn't want her to know. Yeah. So Lee told her that Jacko got pocket money for cleaning his dad's car. Now, just before then, I've mentioned Lee Corns.
Yeah.
Like I say, he's a big advocate for the podcast. What was he like?
He was just a lovely fella.
Yeah.
He was, and I didn't have that many scenes with him, but I do remember him, and I forget the lady who played Mrs. Monroe.
Anna Quayle.
Anna Quayle, that's it.
Yeah.
She was lovely. I don't think I can't remember a bad experience with any of the grown-ups that I work with, certainly.
Yeah.
And as I said, I had a relatively limited experience of working with them because most of my scenes were just with other kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he was lovely. He was lovely, and he was a laugh. I remember
Yeah.
it being fun. You know, sometimes you work with with a room full of kids, it's gonna be mayhem. You
Yeah.
know, kid actors, it's gonna be
Yeah.
mayhem, and you're gonna have the director having to corral. It's kind of like the chaperones.
Yeah.
They have to chaperone us when we're offset. But also, I remember the chaperones on a few occasions saying, "Right, time to behave yourselves
Yeah.
now." And some of them, I do remember some grown-ups, they just want to hurry up and get the job
Yeah.
done so that they can clock off early. If they can get away
Yeah.
early,
Yeah.
they've got lives beyond,
Yeah.
their day job. But I don't remember ever feeling like he was getting frustrated at our shenanigans or anything.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And Anna Quayle's another one you just mentioned there. Another one with like a massive, massive career.
Yeah.
Like behind and then coming on Grange Hill. And that's one of the things I always say is like you can tell how good Grange Hill was by the caliber of actors that they got in to play the teachers. Like, okay, so that day when the lads had no blazers, Mr. Hargreaves, the deputy head or the acting head as he was, asked the lads why they had no blazers on that scene. I was watching that the other day and I couldn't stop laughing. That scene where they're explaining, or they come up with this story about the car going through a puddle. And there was one word that kept coming up. Can you remember what the word was that kept coming up?
Whoosh!
Whoosh! Yeah,
it's so cheesy.
Yeah.
So cheesy.
But every time they mentioned the car, whoosh! Brilliant. They said they were all tying their laces when the car went car went through the puddle. That's why their trousers weren't dirty because they'd all been bent. So it was whoosh kept coming, it kept getting said there. And then they went out cleaning the windscreens again. But Lee said there's got to be an easier way to make money. Like brain surgery. Brain surgery was the way he said it would have been easier.
Because I can't remember now, but I think when we went back to that shopping, the fools that we were, we went back to the same shopping centre.
Yeah.
And I think we were still putting mud on people's.
Yeah.
We were still putting mud on people's windscreens.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it seemed, he was an astute young man.
Yeah.
How are we doing? It's like doing two jobs here. We're dirtying them up and then we're having to clean them.
But they weren't putting as much on this time to try and make it easy for them. So they dirtied the windscreen. But if you remember, just going back to what we said earlier, Alice had heard them talking about cleaning windows.
Yeah.
So Alice and Becky went out and cleaned the car windscreens that the lads had dirtied.
Exactly. She was a scally, that Alice.
Yeah, she was, yeah. She'd got Mr. Hankin to unwittingly make them a cleaning solution for it.
A more superior, if I remember correctly, a more superior cleaning solution.
Definitely. And the lads then said the money the girls had been paid should be theirs because it was them that had got the cars dirty. So they decided to have a race to clean a car windscreen, and whoever cleaned it best would get to keep the money. But unbeknownst to them, it was Mr. Hargreaves. It was Mr. Hargreaves' car, and he was in it. Now, I've mentioned him a couple of times, Mr. Hargreaves, played by Kevin O'Shea. And now, the thing with Mr. Hargreaves was, obviously, he was deputy head. And before him, it had been like Mr. Bronson. So they needed someone very different. Like, it wouldn't have been any good just having Bronson and then getting him in to be exactly the same character. Because I always say he was a bit like Britas. If you remember the Britas Empire, he was that type of character, wasn't he? Now, I mean, you must have had a laugh with him as well, like, because you had a couple of scenes there with him, like, and because he's playing that sort of, I've got authority, but I'm bumbling at the same time. I'm
clueless. I'm clueless.
Must have been a laugh as well, like. So Mr. Hargreaves is in the car. They realise that they all run off, and he caught them. Basically, they told them what had happened, and then Mr. Robson had to give them the proper the proper telling off then in the office.
But no, let's go back really quickly.
Yeah.
Because in that scene, I think it was Natalie.
Yeah.
So it was Becky and Alice, the characters, Becky and Alice, and me, Jacka, and Stuart.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anyone else on the girls' team. It was just
no, that was it. Yeah.
And I remember having such a laugh with those. Just generally, it being a really good vibe.
Yeah.
Between the five of us, and we did that. We did that scene when we run off a few different times because they wanted to keep for different reasons. We'll go off camera, and on one of them, one of the takes, that we did before, one of my shoes came off.
Right.
And I can't remember if I got dared by one of the other cast members in that scene. I can't remember if they dared me or I thought like this. I'm just gonna loosen both of my shoes. If you go back to that scene, you'll see both of my shoes come flying off as I'm running away. Brilliant.
That makes it better though as well.
There you go. There's a little Easter egg for you.
Yeah, that adds something to it. That's brilliant. So like you say, they get sold off. They end up going to see Robson in his office, and they get given a week's detention, and had to help Mr. Griffiths around the school. Another one, Mr. Griffiths, the caretaker, another absolute legend, George A. Cooper. The thing with that was, after all that telling off, Mr. Robson, when the kids leave the office, he thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. Because he knew that Mr. Hargreaves.
Brilliant. But there was also then a ban put on any kids leaving the school at lunchtime, and the lads decided they need to keep it quiet because they didn't want anyone finding out that it was their fault. And we've mentioned Anna Quayle, Mrs. Munro. She was standing in to teach them a biology lesson, because she explained to them that she didn't have a biology cert, which would have been the equivalent of a GCSE. And Lee, being Lee, then asked her if, when she was at school, if they used to write on slate when she was at school. But can you remember what her answer was to that?
No. Was it something to sand?
Sand, yeah. She gives him that look and goes, "No, we use sand."
Yeah,
brilliant. And then
she was lovely, Anna Quayle.
I mean, during that lesson as well, that was when the kids told her that like they had to list all sorts of injuries and infections that could affect their feet, because that was the part of the body they were learning about. And they said in those lessons they always came up with like the negative things that could happen to parts of the body. But it was really just because a trainer ban had come into the school, and they knew that if they had problems with their feet, they'd be exempt from the trainer ban.
Medical letter.
Yeah. So the pupils, they started coming up with all sorts of reasons for having the trainers on then. And again, Mr. Hargreaves sees Lee with his trainers on, and Lee told him that he pulled a ligament in his foot, and he'd been told to wear trainers by his doctors, and he got away with it that time. Also, in the meantime, Brian Shaw had returned to school. He'd made the recovery from it, because when I was talking to Ian about it, Ian said that when his character Brian was told that he had the leukemia, he thought, that's it, that like they're going to write me out. But he said, but what they did was they wanted kids to see that, you can recover from it, and, and it's not always like, you're not always going to die from it. And I thought that was really good when he said that, like, and they brought Brian back in.
With his yellow hat.
Because then this was like the peace garden. If you remember all the scenes out in the garden, and the girls were working in the garden, but the lads found out about it. And Jacko, again with his money making ideas, thought that they could make some money selling flowers. Yeah. So Lee and Jacko pinched some of the flowers, and they nearly got caught by Mrs. Munro. But they gave the flowers to Brian, and Brian ran off with them and put them in his locker. But Mrs. Monroe found a couple of petals, and she said, what's this for? And they went, Jacko said he'd got them for his mum. and again, he got away with it that time. But Lee met Liam. Now, Liam was Justine's boyfriend who went to the other school. And Lee met him at the gates and sold him the flowers for £3.
The princely price of £3. Because Liam had got into trouble with he'd missed the date or something.
Yeah.
So it was like sorry.
It was
sorry flowers.
And Mrs. Monroe found out that the flowers that they'd had the day before weren't for Jacko's mum, and that they'd sold them. And she found out that they were actually from the garden.
Yeah.
So she made them give Becky the money for the flowers, and the lads got 200 lines each as well.
Jacko got robbed. he pulls out a £5, I think.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
I can't remember. And he goes, I'm sorry, but I don't have any change.
Yeah.
They say, what's it? Natalie grabs it. Becky grabs it and says, let's call that compensation.
Compensation, yeah. Brilliant. Now, Liam was there. Liam was at St. Joe's, and there'd been a bit, there was a little bit of feuding going on, and St. Joseph's had threatened to wreck the garden. So the girls had decided to stake out the garden to see if anyone came to protect it. And when the St. Joseph lads turned up, they see that Lee and the lads were there hiding in the shed as well, and chased them off, wrecking some of the flowers in the garden. And this then led to Liam from St. Joseph's and some of his mates turning up at the garden with the kid who fell over.
Yeah.
And they wanted compensation for him breaking his wrist or breaking his arm. And Lee and his mates were there with Ray and some of the older lads, and there was a little bit of arguing back and forth. And they told the lads that they weren't getting any compensation. They told the St. Joe's they weren't getting any compensation. And they left. But this then led to the big fight on the waste ground between Grange Hill and St. Joseph's. So what are your memories of that?
Well, I remember busloads of people getting trucked into this site, loads of chaperones, loads of loud hailers, which wasn't something that I remember normally.
Yeah.
Or maybe a couple of times in some of those playground scenes. And I remember, one of my memories is on the way there. there were a few of the older characters, the girl characters, and and I would have been like a 13, 14-year-old boy and what have you, and I like that energy. and I remember, I can't remember who it was. Anyway, there was three of these girls on the way there, and I was on the coach with them, and they were singing the Bangles, Eternal Flame. So they were singing it beautifully. So I remember that's one of my memories. And I remember us all dispersing and running over rubble and what have you.
Yeah.
I remember there being a nice vibe on set. I can't remember where we shot it.
Well, I've spoken to a few people who were there.
Yeah.
It's the story I always tell. Alan Cave said he was genuinely terrified because Alan Cave was only about 10 or 11. And he said, did
he play techno or Spanish?
Yeah, he played techno, yeah. And he said he was convinced there was lads smoking crack and all kinds there. Like he said, because there was people just bust in, as you said. He said there was so many people he didn't know. Some of them must have been about 20, 21. He said, and he said they were all. He was just genuinely terrified. And it all.
Well, that's look at those two contrasting stories.
Yeah,
I'm talking about beautiful women, beautiful girls singing "Eternal Flame," and he's talking about crackheads in derelict buildings.
Brilliant. Now, I have to ask because there's a scene there in that where there's a few people standing up on a bank, right? And I think Desmond Askew runs over but there's two lads running up the bank. One of them is Mark, who played Stuart, and I think the other one is you.
Yeah, that's slip.
But you have, yeah, I was going to say, you seem to have terrible trouble getting up the bank.
I'm only a little man, Neil. I was even littler then. I've not grown much since 1992, but maybe I didn't tie up my shoelaces from that scene.
But it's just that funny because you can see like you're struggling to get up, and Desmond Askew comes and stands right behind you and just says his lines, and the scene just carries on, and your feet are going everywhere trying to get up there.
I need to go back and look at that. I remember me struggling. Yeah, and
brilliant. And then obviously the fight was all about to kick off. Yeah. It all got pretty tense. And then Justine and Chrissy turned up with Chrissy's baby.
Yeah,
he stopped the fight. The police car turned up, and everyone legs it.
I love the fact. You know what? I love the fact that only one
one solitary panda car turns up. Yeah. Now, I don't know. We said the fight didn't happen. But I think something must have happened to Lee in that fight because we didn't see him again after that.
Oh, you know, it was in preparation for this podcast. You know, I rewatched some of the episodes, and I went on IMDb to see which ones I was in, and then I saw, okay, right, I was only in up until episode 12.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then there were 8 other episodes in that series, because I remember my school. This is, and I'm hoping I'm hoping it was my school, my actual school, and that Grange Hill production didn't think I was rubbish, and then yeah. But I remember my school saying to me that I was taking too much time off school, and I had to make a choice. Right. I either stay at this school or I go to a theatre school. But I thought that happened at the end of that series. But it looks like it must have happened because I think unless I got sacked by Grange Hill, and I've written that narrative to make myself feel better. But then when I went on IMDb, I assumed that Jacko and Stuart didn't have any. You know, my memory 30 odd years ago. So I thought, I wonder if they just didn't have any more scenes.
Yeah.
And, then I watched a couple of later episodes and I saw them in there. Like, something else happened. But so we filmed it in blocks.
Yeah.
So I wonder if between the blocks, my school said, it was either that or Grange will sack me. But it seems a bit brutal to have sacked me mid-series.
But so it was the last time we saw Lee.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the last time we saw you in Grange Hill. Because, I mean, I don't know what happened in between there. Obviously, you've mentioned about school. But you came back in Series 20, which went on air in 97 for one episode, as a character called Dwayne.
Yeah.
Now, Dwayne was at the party in Lauren and Andy Phillips' house. Lauren played by Melanie Joseph, who's been on here, and I know you're in touch with Mel, aren't you? You're like,
she that told me about your
It's down to Mel, like you say, it's down to Mel that you're on here now, and obviously Andy was Ashley Walters, Asher D.
Yeah.
Now it's only one scene, but I think it's quite a hard hitting one. I think
I only remembered. I went back because I went on IMDb. I totally forgot that I'd gone back for that one episode.
So all right then. So how did that bit come about then?
An audition, I'd imagine.
Right.
I can't remember because I was still after Grange Hill. My school said that I could still do bits and pieces.
Yeah.
I could still take days out here and there. I just couldn't take long swathes of time out.
Right, I get you.
And I was really gutted. Anyway, yeah. So I was still represented by Sylvia Young.
Yeah.
And I was still going up for auditions and what have you. So yeah, there must have been a casting director at Grange Hill would have put a casting call out, contacted Sylvia's, and they would said, let's put Sean up for it.
Brilliant. But I mean, but you weren't necessarily happy that you had to leave earlier. Like
I was gutted. Absolutely. Absolutely gutted. And in preparation for this call, like I said, I watched a few episodes, and so many lovely memories came up.
Yeah.
And then it was only this morning that, I realized that Jacko and Stuart were in the end of that series.
Yeah.
I thought, what actually happened? And then it made me really resent Mr. Wheel. I'm going to call him out. We're going to leave this in the podcast. Listening, Mr. Wheel, he was my headmaster at Willis School in Highgate. Yeah, he's the one that said, no, you can't do it. And Mr. Will, if it transpires, if you're still alive, and it transpires that I got sacked by Grange Hill, I'll issue a formal apology back on this podcast. I'll ask Neil to invite me back on, and I'll apologize. And I'll even send you a letter, Mr. Will.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. Yeah,
if it transpires. But my memory was that he gave me an ultimatum.
Right.
My family an ultimatum, and that's why I left. So to answer your question, I definitely did not want to leave.
Right.
I loved it. I loved the experience.
Yeah.
I've done bits and pieces before that, but a regular thing with such a wide group of people of a similar vibe, having fun, and the politics of it. Who fancies who, and all of that, and being with Mark, effectively my cousin on set. Making friends with Jamie Lahane, who you told me he sadly I was, when you told me that, I was gutted. And then anyway, so I was gutted to hear that. And Nina Fry, who played, I remember Robin and Helena, who she played. She was someone in year 7.
Yeah, she played Diane.
Yeah,
she's been on here. Yeah.
She's been on, has she?
Yeah, she's been on, yeah.
Yeah, I tried to ask her out for a date. Right. I think I might chance my arm with Nina as well. Right. Down there as well. Margot Selby.
Yeah, Margot's been on. Yeah, Margot's great. Yeah,
we had a great time. Apart from Mark, John Pickard I've seen a couple of times because our works, what we've gone on to do since, there's been a little bit of overlap. We haven't actually worked together, but we've collaborated on some brainstorming ideas. But Margaret and I met her afterwards when we were in our 20s, I think, at some point. I think Margaret might have gone to Sylvia's, actually.
I think so, yeah. Oh, brilliant.
So that's a very long-winded way of me saying I definitely did not want to leave, no.
Now, whenever I'm putting an episode of a podcast online, in the week before, I'll put picture clues online. I'll post them and people have to try and guess who the next guest is going to be. And the first person to guess it correctly gets to ask the next guest a question. So I always feel like I'm on Going Live or something when I do this bit. So I've got a question here from someone called Julian Foster. And Julian's asked, given the fact that Lee was, a mate of Jacko's and he was always involved in like Jacko's schemes and that, did you ever hope that the part of Lee would have been expanded to something so that you would have got your own storyline?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have loved to have had my own storyline, and I think had I've not seen it, and I've not seen any of series 16 or 17, and I don't know how Stuart's character evolved, but perhaps I think with more experience, maybe the writers have more confidence to give you your own storylines. Because I think it would have been possible for us within the same group, the 4 of us, let's say Brian, Lee, Jacko and Stuart, if we were to keep moving forward together, I think there was enough capacity over multiple series for us to, for one of us to have led our cohort story. So I would have loved it. I would have absolutely loved it. Yeah.
Brilliant. But like I say, you went back for this scene, and it was at the party in the house, and there was Lucy, played by Belinda Crane, was getting chatted up by some of Andy's mates. So there was yourself, and then Sol, I think he was called, this other character, and she didn't want to know him, and he accused her of being racist. No, this Sol did, and then Lucy then told Carleen that she felt uncomfortable because she was the only white person at the party.
Right.
And this Saul then came over and he called Lucy a racist again, but he called Carleen a Malteser as well. Now, Lorraine, who's played Carleen, has been on as well, and she's talked about, how that does go on. And stuff like that. But like I said, I thought it was good to show that scene and the fact that it showed some aspects of racism and it showed some aspects of sexism as well, with this lad chatting her up and just expecting her to just go along with him. And
also on that point about the Malteser, that sense of internalized racism that black people and people of color sometimes carry, you know. So it was. I don't remember, but that storyline, as you describe it, sounds important.
Yeah, definitely, because like I'm a white male, so I've never experienced anything like that, and as a young lad growing up, my experience of growing up would be very different to a black person growing up. I've said on here before times when if I ever got stopped by the police when I was out, it was because I looked dead young when I was 18, 19, 20. So they wanted to know why a 13-year-old was out on his own. It wasn't for any other reason, So it would have been very, very different. Like you said, like we've said, it's important. It was important to show those sorts of things did go on. And at the party, the police then arrived. They break the party up, and everyone leaves. And we see Dwayne, who you played, saying oink oink to the police. Quite a lot. And nothing got said to him. But we definitely didn't see you in Grange Hill after that. You said earlier on about you weren't sure if anyone else had played two characters. There'd been a few. So John Drummond, who played Trevor Cleaver, he'd been in it as a pupil in another school before. Kelly George, he'd been in it as a St. Joe's pupil earlier on as well. There are a few more instances like they're like the two sort of main ones there. So then after Grange Hill, you said you were in the bill for 2 episodes.
I was in the bill. Touch of Frost. You said a show called Sometime Never with one of the. Do you remember those? Is that Sarah Crane? I forget her. Sarah. Anyway, you remember those Philadelphia ads?
Yeah.
With the 2 female.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the blonde one was in this show. Sometime Never played us. I seem to always get these parts as a cheeky, lovable rogue. I'd like to.
I can't understand why, to be honest.
Yes, I did that. I did something with Richard Bryars. A few little bits.
And the thing about the bill we've mentioned, Renee Zager was in the bill when you were there, and Renee Zager had played Mike Bentley in Grange Hill. He'd been a sixth former. But then there's nothing after the bill on your IMDb. It's catchphrase time. I always say this. I know it's not the most reliable source of information, but after that, there's nothing else for you.
Yeah, so the bill would have been when I was at university.
Right.
So I did the tricycle thing, Macbeth, which I really enjoyed. Yeah, so that would have been. I turned 18 when I was doing that.
Right.
And then I went to university after that. And I was always interested in economics and the judiciary. And you're touching on being stopped by police and what have you. I think growing up in London, I'm born 77, so I grew up in the 80s effectively. And the first time I was stopped by police was when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
And I was walking home. I was walking up the shop. I was walking up the shop to get some milk and bread for mum, and a woman who lived up the road from us, she had her house burgled.
Right.
And the police were there. And as I walked past, they collar me and say, "Where have you just come from? Where are you going?" And I started to cry. And
Yeah.
this was a white woman whose house had been robbed. She came downstairs. It was one of those big kind of mansion houses in Hampstead. So she ran down the stairs from her front door and kind of separated, kind of got the police off me and said, "What are you doing? Look at the size of him. How is he likely to
Yeah.
rob my house?" Anyway, so and then I've been between the age of 6 when I first stopped,
Mm-hmm.
maybe my early 30s was the last time. I don't know, 10, 15 times, I would
Wow.
say, if not more, if not more. Anyway, so I've always been interested in judiciary and
Yeah.
how different members of society are treated differently by the system. And I
Uh-huh.
was always interested, you talk about good teachers. I know we talked about
Yeah.
Monroe and Mr. Hankin. I had a really good teacher, economics teacher. Economics teacher, Mr. Groves,
Uh-huh.
at my school, and he said you should do it as A level, and I loved it. So I did it as a degree. Went to university, did economics with law, and I thought I was going to become a corporate barrister because I
Right.
thought that would give me it would scratch two itches.
Yeah.
I'll be on stage in a courtroom.
Yeah.
I'll be doing law. But then I graduated, and my then girlfriend's neighbor ran the sound studio in Soho. And he
Uh-huh.
said, "What are your research and law firms you want to join? Why don't you come and be a runner at the sound studio and just fetch people's teas and coffees? I'll pay you pay you cash in hand." I was still
Yeah.
living at home. I was getting £50 a day.
Brilliant.
200, that's £250 a week. I was loving it. And so
Yeah.
the plan was, of an evening, I'd go home and research law firms and start applying and what have you. But I just kind of loved being in that creative industry. And then
Yeah.
I was there for a year, and then I was approached by a small advertising agency to become a producer and account handler, and then I worked my way up. And so that's what I've done since. Oh, sorry, go back to the bill. So the bill would have been when I was at university, and
Yeah.
then I left. Sylvia approached me because I was still repped by her, and she said, "Yeah, are you still up for doing a bit of acting?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, there could be a part for you in the bill." And I said, "Right, I'll go for the audition," and I did it. And I think it was 2 or 3 days filming,
Yeah.
which was fine. Yeah, so that
Yeah.
was it. And that was since the bill. I've not done anything. That was my last gig.
Yeah. Wow. So then
Yeah, sorry.
you've just told us a big chunk of a story there. You become a runner then
Yeah.
in the studio and sort of moved on. So is that what you're up to now then?
Yeah, yeah. So going back to the acting, I do voiceovers. I
Right.
scratch the itch that way every now and again.
Yeah.
Um, but my main bread and butter is I make radio. I work for an agency that produces, or I run an agency that produces radio commercials for,
All right.
called Radioville. And so brands come to us when they want to raise their awareness or acquire more customers. And we use audio and radio advertising to help brands achieve those objectives. So that's what I do now. Yeah, I've been at the business 24 years.
Wow,
Yeah.
brilliant, brilliant. And you've mentioned that you've seen some of the cast since you left, but are you still properly in touch with them? Like,
No,
no.
because even Mark Dakota, yeah. So he last time I think I saw Mark was possibly at my dad's funeral,
Right.
and that was 20 years ago, 22 years ago, something like
Wow.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the last time I think I saw Mark. Um, yeah, Margot, but so it must have been I saw Margot in my early 20s then,
Right.
possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've not seen anyone. John Pickard. I've seen John Pickard,
Yeah.
but we're not in regular contact.
Yeah.
Yeah, John and I, because we got mutual friends. John's older brother, Nick.
Yeah.
Nick, is that his older brother or younger brother?
Nick's older. Yeah.
That older brother. Yeah. So uh, Nick and I have got mutual friends,
Right.
and those mutual friends kind of reconnected me with John
Yeah.
Pickard.
He's a good lad. John's been on here as well. Like,
lovely fella. And yeah, like I said, we've met up a few times and collaborated on a few things, but we haven't worked together as yet.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we are coming towards the end of the interview, Sean, and I've got the same few questions that I ask everyone at the end of every episode. So, over the last few years, there's been talk in the press of a Grange Hill movie in the works. Phil Redmond has written it. Sarah Sugarman, who was in it in the early days, has been slated as the director for it and stuff. What do you think of the idea of a Grange Hill movie?
As long as they bring back Lee Johnson.
Yeah! Yeah!
Yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah, why not? Yeah, I think, I don't know if there's an appetite for it. I don't think it would do the legacy, if it wasn't as well received as those involved would hope. Even if that's the case, I don't think it would do the legacy of Grange Hill any damage, in the same way that Spooks, that BBC drama. I love Spooks, and I love all of the actors that were in the movie that they did, but the movie didn't live up to
yeah.
And I don't think that has undone the series. So I'm all up for it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I've always said,
I
don't think Phil Redmond would let it be something he didn't want it to be.
Exactly.
Basically. Yeah.
Exactly. If Phil Redmond's involved, it's going to be good.
Yeah. And as you've said there, if you're asked, we'd see a return of Lee Johnson, would we?
100%.
And you said that you'd watched Grange Hill as a kid. So, other than Lee Johnson, who was your favourite character?
I like the caretaker, Mr. Griffin. Yeah, I liked him. Yeah, just because he brought, even before Mr. Hargreaves, he brought a bit of levity.
Yeah.
And obviously you got like Zamo. I thought he was great in that whole storyline. Yeah, I think maybe those two. Yeah,
brilliant. And if you couldn't have played Lee Johnson, which other character would you like to have played?
I'm gonna give you two.
Yeah.
Ray, I like Ray. He was in my series. I liked his cheekiness, and I liked his foolishness. He was a fun character.
Yeah.
Zamo, I reckon. Zamo, because of the storyline, and that led to that cohort going to meet the American president. Yeah.
And you would have had Jackie Wright as your girlfriend as well, which would have been a bonus as well, I imagine.
Which is not a bad thing.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
But I still reckon I would have taken Helena.
Brilliant. Okay, so the final question then, Sean, is why do you think there's still such affection for Grange Hill?
I think it spans so many years, and I think so that means there are a few different, generations that can bond over their experience of having enjoyed it. It was such an integral part to so many people's childhoods, in the same way that shows like Countdown were, or The Fun House, or Brookside, or Biker Grove, or, those things, or Andy and Gordon in the Brook. All of those kind of things. And also I think because there were so many characters in the show, there was always a character that someone watching it could relate to.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it was very reflective of society, not only ethnically, but in terms of, gender, personality, confidence, your interests, and it covers so many storylines that have affected so many people in real life, be it bullying or leukemia or death or people moving away or divorce or whatever it might be. And I think, and it was, it covers some really gritty, and I think, because I've got friends who weren't allowed to watch it because it was too saucy.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Not saucy, sorry, a bit too fruity, a bit too gritty. And I don't think you'd have a TV show, that children's TV show, that uses the word bitch and slag.
Yeah.
It was a bit edgy.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for coming on and giving us your experiences on the program. It's been brilliant talking to you. I haven't stopped laughing and smiling the entire time I've been on.
Can I really quickly? I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me on.
No, not at all.
It's reopened some really, really treasured memories, which I haven't thought about for 30 odd years, 30, 40 years. Well, not 40, but 30 odd years. So thank you very much, Neil. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, it's been great. It's been great talking to you. And to anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.